The content of this podcast includes topics that may be difficult for some people to confront or discuss. These conversations can be triggering. If you are underage, please speak to your guardian before continuing. Welcome back to episode 2 of That's an Issue podcast on the Living Lchaim Network. I'm Yaakov Langer, and on this week's episode, we have Dr. Tara and Yoni Kleschik talking to, they're married, by the way, if you haven't realized, talking to Dr. Shloimie Zimmerman about shame. And I have to ask you all a question, though. Everyone listening, I want you to think about this. Are you a loser? Well, I know, yeah, it sounds a little mean, but is that something that goes through your head, whether consciously or subconsciously, or you're like thinking to yourself, like, am I good enough? Am I doing a good job? We tend to beat ourselves up more than necessary, and I kind of think of it like when you're younger. When you have to write a book report, you have to, very often you talk about the conflict. What's the conflict? Is this story man versus nature, man versus establishment, man versus man, or man versus himself? I think in this episode would be classified as man versus himself. This is an episode for everyone and anyone. This is something that if you're in 2022, you somewhat struggled or has struggled with this. And we also delve into like, who are your biggest critics? Spoiler alert, it's yourself. And we get to the core of it, like, what defines you? Who are you? Are you defining yourself in the wrong way? And there's even parenting tips on how to deal with kids when it comes to shame. There's really so much more to be said, but I'll leave it to the pros and get ready for this episode.
Mental health, relationships, those are loaded topics and something that affects every part of our lives. But we aren't having enough open conversations about it.
And that's an issue. Shloimie, welcome to the podcast. For some of the folks that don't know you, can you describe what you do in the Jewish community?
Sure. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I run a group practice. We have offices in Bar Park, Flatbush, and Queens. That's my full-time day job. As a volunteer, I'm vice chair of the Amudim Clinical Advisory Board, along with Dr. Pelkowitz and some other esteemed colleagues. And that's a volunteer thing we do, so we try to help that out in any way we can clinically. I'm also the chair of a small organization in Queens called Magay New York, which is mostly does child safety, prevention, education, those kinds of things. Middle of writing a book for the Orthodox community, and we try to keep busy.
Yeah, it sounds like you don't have...
A book on what? Could you tell us?
So the book is about, for parents and educators, to talk to boys who are entering towards puberty and adolescence about how to deal with the changes in their body, sexuality, etc., etc.
It's a pretty sensitive topic.
Yeah, they told me they weren't going to do that one first.
So we also wanted to discuss today about shame, because I know that that's a topic that you've covered in some of your prior speeches, some I've personally listened to, we've listened to, which are really good. And a lot of people in our community have this struggle where, on the one hand, you know, I'm assuming it's because some of us are religious, and that interplay between being religious and feeling bad about things that you do, if in the practice of religion or in the not practice of religion, how that can affect one's mental health.
So absolutely. And that's actually a very sort of complicated piece. And I'll take you through a slight, twist in my journey. So I think one of the talks you're referencing was a couple of years ago. I spoke for an Amudim event about shame. And a lot of that was based on Brene Brown's work. And Brene Brown has sort of crushed it worldwide in terms of vulnerability and shame. And she has a very sort of user-friendly approach to shame, being this fear of disconnection that's really underpinned by this sense of, I'm unworthy, something's wrong with me. And she contrasts that with guilt, which is more, I did something wrong, I made a mistake is her line, versus shame is, I am a mistake. And I think worldwide, so many people resonated with this message that they have a bit too much of this kind of shame. So actually, while I was working on the book I referenced, so a lot of issues that come up, particularly for teens, and especially around the topic of sexuality, is shame. You feel badly about yourself, about your urges, about all that kind of stuff. So I write a lot about shame in this book. And it was a complicated journey getting haskamas for this book. It's very sensitive, as you said. And sort of after finishing the book and really getting a few Rabbanim on board, but one who really looked at it very carefully is Rav Aaron Feldman Shlita from Ner Yisrael. And Rabbi Feldman was going over this with a fine-tooth comb. And he literally writes comments on the side of it, like checking my commas. And one of the big places where he sort of said, hey, stop the works, was this idea that, okay, shame is this underlying negative feeling, this horrible feeling associated with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, violence, suicidality, just this god-awful thing. And so I said, okay, but we have this concept of busha that's all over the Jewish world that's seemingly a positive force. So I sort of make an edit out that can't be what busha is. Busha is something healthy in the Jewish world. And what we're talking about is shame, is toxic shame. It's nothing to do with busha. Rabbi Feldman's having none of it. He's not buying it. He basically comes back to me and says, no, busha is probably shame. And unless you can come up with something, we got to rework this. And I had done an extensive amount of research prior to this, but when you get that kind of feedback, you go really do a deep dive. And what came out of that was that Brene Brown is awesome, but it's a very simplified approach. And there really are cultures, particularly not in the West, but in the Eastern world, where shame in Asian cultures is a big piece. And for the Jews, David HaMelech says one of the hallmarks of being Jewish is we're rachmanim, we're merciful, baishanim, we're somewhat shamefaced, and gom lechasadim, we do kindness. So here's this hallmark of being a Jew, is this shame. The Archas Tzadikim says it's of all the milas of your midos, you should put this above all else because it's the most beneficial way to not do averos. So here we have it's toxic, and here we're always talking about this busha.
Great. Yeah.
So how do you reconcile? This is basically the real issue. And so after doing a lot of deep dive into the research and a ton of Torah sources, I sort of come up with a different frame of reference. Shame, if we stick to it, is an emotion we all feel. And it's one of the most unique emotions in that it has universal expression physically. So most feelings, depending on which culture you're in, you're going to show up differently. Shame is almost always you bow your head and you avert your gaze. You look away. There's some sort of coiling up into yourself and not wanting to be seen. So that goes across the spectrum. But what's driving that really goes to the heart of your question. So in the toxic sort of shame that Brene Brown's talking about, that's coming from a sense, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthless. I'm a fraud. If you knew the real me, you would want nothing to do with me. Yeah, I'm putting on a good show, but come on, you don't know what I really think, what I do. You don't see me in my messy worst. Shame in the Torah perspective is exact opposite. Shame comes from, do you know what I really am?
That's interesting.
I am from the infinite. I am divine. I have a child of God. The whole world was created for me. Now, I'm not acting in accordance with that lofty goal. Then I feel ashamed. So one is, I am bad. One is, I'm awesome. And I'm not really acting in accordance with that. So you have literally two opposite ends of the spectrum. When you have healthy shame, that's actually the best prevention from something because I'm above that. Come on, that's beneath me. I don't need to go there. Versus, I'm a fraud. I'm a fake.
Almost like where the default is. What's the default provision? Is it, am I from a godly place?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore I'm ashamed of what the act or what I've done versus
so
where I started. Am I starting from a lowly place?
Right. So am I not living up to something? You know, my real truth? Am I not living up to my amazing truth? Or am I really, my truth is I'm a fraud and there's nothing to live up to and I'm hiding that.
Wow.
All right, interesting. Well, what about guilt? Where does guilt fit in?
So guilt, again, if you really do a deep dive, is still complex. It's probably still more action-focused, as Brene Brown says. Guilt is linked with adaptation. You know, it's pretty adaptive. If I could say, hey, this thing that I did wrong, I shouldn't have done that. I made a mistake. That's actually pretty healthy. Obviously, you can have some pretty dark guilt. Oh, so that's inappropriate. You feel guilty about stuff that you didn't actually do wrong. So both of these things can have healthy and unhealthy versions, but shame in its toxic form is brutal. And it's, considered a master emotion. It gets really deep, this deep sense of, I'm not good enough. Something's off with me.
So can you walk me through, like, the progression? Somebody starts off in that, and how does it morph into something that they didn't expect it to be? So someone does something maybe they shouldn't have done, and what's the progression? How does it start? Where does it end?
So there's probably an entire continuum from sometimes we all experience shame. The only people we don't experience shame are psychopaths. Right. So we all want to be able to experience shame. And again, there's different aspects of it. The hope is that the progression is a healthy sense that, hey, I'm a good kid, and come on, knock it off. You shouldn't do that. Come on, you didn't need to bully him. You didn't need to make fun of him, right? There's some sense like, I'm above that. I didn't need to do that. It's probably a healthy adaptive thing. If you start to internalize constant messages that you're not living up, that you're a disappointment, that the people in your life are not happy with you, they're not excited to be with you, they don't just love you as you are, you're going to start to erode that sense, and you're going to start to believe something's wrong with me. And it can be very gradual. It doesn't need to get very dramatic. If you get thousands and thousands of subtle messages of you're not worthy, you're not really wanted, you will internalize that. And you'll become very distant from the truth that you are this amazing, B'shvili nivra olam, the whole world was created for you. You're this Tzelem Elokim. That'll feel totally distant from that. And you'll feel like, I don't know who really wants to be with me. My parents don't seem to want to, my friends, my rabbi, my teacher. And those shaming messages can really seep in. And then you start to have that narrative go on in your head. So we all know who's always the biggest critic around us.
Ourselves.
Is ourselves. Where did that come from? It's because we got a lot of this playing into the tape from early on. And now we don't even need anybody there anymore. We do it all by ourselves. And that becomes the biggest source of pain and suffering in the world, is what's going on in my own head.
Wow.
Right. So toxic shame would need to start from a young age.
So again, you never want to make these grand statements, because you'll have this guy with the healthiest childhood and he'll have some horrific trauma that occurs as an adult and send you flying. Also, let's start with the core sense of shame is this innate human capacity, right? And so interestingly, right, we just read Parshas Bereshis 2 weeks ago. So Adam and Chava, before they ate from the tree, they were walking around without any clothes because they were not embarrassed. All of a sudden, once they internalize this Yetzer Hara, this sense of, whoa, I could use parts of my life for things in a very negative way, all of a sudden they said, I got to cover this up. So it's built in. They didn't have any bad parents, right? It's something. Right. But then the actual Satan, if you want to call it, what is his best play is to take you to the exact opposite of what Hashem wants you to feel. What does God want you to feel? You're beloved, you're cherished, you're amazing, you're a piece of the infinite and divine. So what's going to be the direct opposite to that? You're worthless, you're meaningless. It's a big mistake that you're awake today. Come on, anybody who knew the real you wouldn't want anything to do with you. So you can have the entire spectrum. And that's so it's in there, our capacity to go to that dark, unhealthy place. And if you have enough human interactions that sort of work along with that negative side, you can really have somebody that's filled with toxic shame.
Do you feel that, where do you find that people, the acts that they do cause them to have shame? So I guess, is it like a religious thing? Is it like a sexual thing? Is it, what causes, in your experience, what is the cause of so much shame? So I don't find it to be a quote unquote religious thing, because this is, Brene Brown has 15 million views of her talk. I don't think she was only talking to, religious people. It's a worldwide phenomenon. It's something that's at the bedrock of so many mental health issues. So this is happening by the millions. And again, there's this process innate to us where we can go to that dark side, where we hear the criticisms much more than we hear the positives. We can take that in. And we're not really trained on how to cope with that as kids. We're not prepared for this. So you just have this mind going on all day,
attaching itself to negativity, and nobody's really taught you how to deal with that. So obviously the people who have more shaming messages, they have less secure attachments from earliest ages. Was somebody really responsive to them? Did somebody meet their needs? Was somebody kind and compassionate? Did somebody relate to them as they're just loved and cherished? Or did somebody relate to them very inconsistently? Was somebody checked out and just on their phone? Was somebody had way too high level expectations of them and they can never meet it? It can come from anything, and it comes much more from how you're treated than something abstract. It's not just these verbal messages you get. It's how do I actually relate to you? What's in the actual connection? What do you see in my eyes reflected back to you? That kamayim panim panim. How are you related to? Is somebody sort of light up and just happy to be with you, or somebody like, if you would only behave better and cut that out, then maybe I'll grace you with
Interesting.
a
So you're
pleasant
saying like almost like the parent-child is a big one.
Parent-child's a big one. The hierarchy, it's parent-child. Then you get friends, teachers, clergy. Those are your four sort of main places where you're going to either get built and get closer to the truth that you are some amazing, infinite, divinely created, or you're going to get really far away and that you're just lowly and negative and unwanted.
So what do people do when they feel, what masks do people have to, put on, or what do they have? How do they mask this pain? Like, what is the go-to if I'm feeling like this negative feeling, and this is how I was brought up, or that's how my friends treated me, or that's how the professors treated me. What's going to be my reaction?
So at every level, on some level, we're probably all masking something. There are probably very few of us who are that secure to just come out and show up as we are. Right? We're all putting on masks, from the clothes we wear to hiding behind our, degrees, our professions, etc. So we all wear masks. And probably that's one of the hallmarks of real mental health is how comfortable are you sitting with your true self and sharing that with the world.
Right.
And so we have different ways of putting on masks. So when we talk about this, it can sound very dark, but we all experience this on some level. Are you ready to have somebody come to your house, unknown, with its mess, right? Dinner time. Or do you need to go skedaddle and fix everything up because you don't want them to see that, your house also has dinner.
You're describing me exactly.
So our kids and our spouses are a huge source of shame because our egos are very attached to them. My kid's making a total mess in the store. I feel, oh gosh, I'm inadequate. Very few of us are like, that's what kids do. It just comes to mind, like one of the conferences I gave a talk, and I thought, I really crushed it this time. And it was one of these events where we went for Shabbos with my family. And so people are coming over to me, and I'm waiting for okay, Zimmerman, you knocked it out of the park. And they tell me, Shloimie, you gave us such chizuk. Why? Your kids were so out of it. You're the psychologist, and they were so wild. Wow, I felt so much better. Why? Because this idea that we're all human. And the psychologists, we don't have any magical answers. And we're all sharing this human space is so hard for us to do. So we mask. So obviously in your most extreme masks are going to be places where I can't handle pain. So I'm going to turn to, full-blown addictions and hiding. Another extreme mask is I'm going to look perfect on Instagram. Everything, my life is perfect. My house is perfect. My vacations are perfect. Everything is perfect. Then what we typically see, in the mid-range is we're all wearing something. So what's the probably most sanctioned mask we all have? Money.
Interesting.
Right? What's one of the few things that you can do at the expense of your family and time and keep working at it till who knows what time and just be cool, wow, you're a great businessman pursuing money. So, and what do we call it? Oh, you're successful. So it's probably the world's most sanctioned mask/drug. And so many people hide behind the pursuit of money. We can talk about how anything could be. Somebody could feel really horribly about themselves and have to learn more and more Torah to say, I'm not okay. So the driving force of that isn't, I'm amazing and I want to explore the truth and beauty of Torah. It's, I'm horrible. And unless I learn many, many more hours and I reach this and this, goal, I'm worthless. So anything can be used to hide. So really have to know what's the driving force.
What's the driving? What's really going on? Well, I'm saying that's what you have to think. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. And let's say a person figured out that they're doing these things for the wrong reasons, or from coming from a place of trying to hide this shame.
Right.
Like, how do they begin to explore that and try to fix it?
So even with this, it's very easy to sit as a mental health fan and make people feel, okay, I'm totally unhealthy. This is a wreck, just forget everything that I'm doing. The truth is, like everything we're talking about, it's a mix. For the most part, it's gray. Very few of us are doing something purely for the sake of heaven and healthy reasons. And very few of us are doing something purely for unhealthy, shame-based reasons. So what I tell people, listen, if you know that like the majority is unhealthy, most things you should probably stop doing. If there's specific, rabbinic need to check on something halachic. I'm not talking about something halachic, but most behaviors, if the majority is driven by unhealthy stuff, you really want to keep that in check.
Could you give an example?
Right. So let's just one that pops into mind. It's going to sound really outlandish for some folks. So I have some very wealthy clients, very prominent clients, and so just in the last couple of weeks, two of them, very, very well-known figures, very wealthy, constantly talking about how stressed they are and unhappy with things, and yet doing more and more deals. Some of them are astronomically large deals. And when I asked them, why are you doing it? I said, that's a bizarre question. There's some of these have hundreds of millions of dollars up and down on them. Like, well, what type of stupid question is that? Why? None of you are starving, but, for you and probably a couple generations can live. What's the motive? And when you start to peel back the layers, some of it's competition, some of it's to make an impact. They don't feel that they've made their mark yet and they have to do more. So for something like that, where you're just pushing and working yourself in its negativity, and again, you don't need to, you might really want to ask, hey, can you pull back on that?
You're saying when the shame is propelling you and you're not happy.
And you're not happy, you're frustrated, and most of the time...
Let's say you love doing deals.
So again, you love doing deals, but most of the time, what do you love? Do you love that you're able to hide? Because, wow, I'm killing it. Or do you love the actual process, and do you love what the money can do for you and the community, etc.? What do you love? Because we love our masks deeply, because we feel very vulnerable without them. So, right, if my practice, God forbid, came crashing down and I'm no longer, some psychologist on podcasts, like, who am I? That could be real scary, right? It's really scary stuff. So do you love the mask, or do you love something internal about it? And again, if it's majority that you're just quashing down the pain, the frustration, the angst, that's what it's all about, learning how to sit with yourself. And you have to face, on some level, you have to expose yourself to yourself, and you have to show that to the world in order to really heal. But again, we don't want people ceasing to say, okay, we're stopping business, we're stopping learning, right? Again, most things you can tweak. So I always tell people, make a slight change. Try to focus less on the unhealthy reason. So decrease the negative, increase the positive. So we always talk about, don't just repeal.
Interesting.
Replace. Just improve. Tilt the seesaw 5 degrees down, like this and like this. That's how we make very small incremental changes.
Wow. Okay, can we talk about kids for a minute? Right, we're parents here, probably. Parents are listening. How do we, I say prevent, because we know this is normal and going to happen. How do we try and protect our kids from this toxic level of the shame?
Right. So, what most people love to do is just jump in with certain techniques. And what I find happens then is that parents just feel more shame because they can't do them. Like, of course, like speak kindly, be attentive and focused, never get upset, never yell, be positive, right?
Right.
And then what do? 25 minutes later, you're screaming, you're yelling, you're like, just freaking get to bed, right? And then what do? You have a shame attack.
Right.
What the heck is wrong with me? I'm a psychologist. I just gave this advice and I myself am not doing it, right? So the first and foremost thing I would tell people, is work on your own shame, which don't work on saying, oh, I'm so shamed, I'm transmitting it to my kids. That's feeding shame. Work on, okay, I'm a human being. I'm trying. Things are really difficult. How can I accept myself more? Because the more you can accept your humanness, your failings, the areas where you're weak in, then you can start to do that for others, especially your kids. The more you're going to be yourself, I'm not a good enough mom. I'm not a good enough dad. Guess what? You might resist some quote-unquote bad behavior for a day, too, but it's driven from the wrong place. And what are you transmitting to your kids, paradoxically? We can't accept our humanness.
This is great advice.
So the
awesome.
first and foremost thing is to actually work on becoming more okay with yourself, not perfecting yourself and becoming the perfect parent. Because I can tell you, I tried that for years, and it did not work at all.
But wouldn't you say that there is a line where you have to say that's not okay? Like if you're I don't know, abusing your kid, right? Then you can't say, well, I really love myself. Take that bat and do something crazy, right? Like there has to be a line somewhere where that's not okay.
So it's a very tricky thing, because that's a bit of the straw man argument, because that's assuming, right, really saying that's not okay works. Just use it sparingly. When was the last time you told somebody that's not okay and that really worked?
Oh gosh, now I gotta think of something.
When was the last time I said that?
Or somebody told you. Yeah.
And it really worked.
It doesn't work. It does not work. You're not gonna come up with anything.
Okay, it works with physical things, right? Like it's not okay to put your hand in fire because it burns.
Is it because
someone told me no? It's because it burns.
Because it burns, or they have such a strong reaction that that you like, whoa, that creates a visceral response in you that like, whoa, fire is equated with, oh my God, something terrible is going to happen. So the paradox is, if you were to tell people who are struggling, even with terrible things, whether they're abusing their kids or, God forbid, they're struggling themselves, they're addicts, they're acting out, they're jeopardizing things, stop it. You're not helping anybody. So it's the same issue, that's just on a deeper level. If they could have more compassion for themselves, they're much more likely to be able to stop it. They're not acting out because they're psychopaths and they want to hurt somebody and they don't care, or they don't know right from wrong. They're acting from places of trauma, of pain. They're reenacting their own stuff. And so, yes, they need compassion too. That doesn't mean that we could just, okay, until you're all healed, you can mercilessly destroy your children. No, they need help. But the help they need isn't judgment and criticism. They need help to be able to deal with their own demons so that they can be calmer, so they can be more present, so they can be more compassionate to their children. And actually, this is the paradox. Some of the biggest drivers of abusing others or hurting others is because you feel so lousy about yourself, that you feel so negative, and you can't sit with yourself. You're just so frazzled and frustrated all the time that you just pop off and lose it.
Can you explain that last piece? That you feel so. Can you explain that? I think that's a big piece.
So there's nothing more exhausting and tormenting than living with, I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough, I'm constantly messing up, what is going on with these kids, what's going on in my house, right? It drains us. When we come from a negative place, it's the most draining thing. It's the most thing that takes us down as people. And nobody really works well from that kind of place. So what happens is you're so easily triggered. You're already feeling lousy, and then your kids aren't going to bed, and you're just toast. They made a mess. They're not doing their homework. You imagine that, your next door neighbor just says, okay, dinner time's over, everybody up to bed, and the kids are marching upstairs.
They are, by the way.
They are.
In our house, that's how it works.
Exactly. And that's what we project. We imagine that that's what's going on, and so then we judge ourselves and say, so something's really wrong with me. And it doesn't happen just to stay with you. So what? You take it out. You take it on your kids. You take it on your spouse. And this is sort of how just shame generalizes all over the map. And so what most people do much better when they can actually be more self-compassionate. We speak to ourselves in ways we would never speak to somebody else, right? When was the last time you said, well, you're such an idiot, right? You don't say that to other people, but we have that voice inside all the time. So learning to develop self-compassion, learning to ignore this thing inside that's constantly criticizing, constantly worried about the future, constantly berating us for the past. That's why I say it's really helpful to almost view it as the Satan or a shame demon or a gremlin, to take it, and that's not who I actually am. That's not my identity. There's this thing inside me, and it's designed to take me down. So you sort of see it as the enemy. And for young kids, we train them. And this is one of the ways you can help build shame resilience for kids. Is there's one book I saw recently it calls them brain bullies. And you identify the anxiety bully, the shame bully, the fear, what if, the jealousy, right? And you talk about that's in your head. We all have them in our head. And instead of saying, oh, that's me, saying, no, there he is. Identify it. Oh, there he comes. You don't have to listen to that. You can ignore that. You can talk back to it. There are many ways. The ultimate goal is to be able to have all the chatter come and chill with it. Not let it affect you so much.
My son said that too. Are you also thinking that? But sometimes when my son does something wrong or, impulsive, because that's what 7-year-olds do,
right?
I'll be like, my brain told me to do it. I knew I didn't want to listen, but my brain told me to do it. It's very interesting.
And there's an amazing thing there, that there's some sense that he has that I am not my brain. There's this part of us, and we believe that. As Jews, we believe there's something, we're divine, there's a soul behind it. And there's parts of us that are more, animalistic and this Yetzer Hara piece. But truthfully, like, we're feeling compelled. And if you could identify it as that's not who I am, you're much less bothered by it. Mm-hmm. So when you can notice, hey, there it goes again, you can start to make peace of it. I have this chatterbox inside that's constantly spewing all this negativity. It's there. I can't necessarily make it stop, but I don't have to pay attention to it, and I certainly don't have to identify with it.
This reminds me of like meditation, like a lot of mindfulness where like it's all about like letting the emotion pass and watching it from a distance.
Right. So there's a big piece of mindfulness and meditation here of learning to let thoughts and feelings pass. There's a next level of it where you can notice those thoughts and feelings. So
before they happen, you're saying?
No, even while. You could sit and sort of and watch thoughts, and you can even hear this voice inside of you. So who's noticing? Who's talking in there, and who's noticing? It's sort of a trippy thing. Like, so it's called the subject-object problem. If I could notice it, I can't be it. We all have this capacity. There's a calm, still, healthy, deeper part of us that can notice, oh, those are my thoughts, those are my feelings. So who's the noticer? And that is something I believe they'll call consciousness, and I think we will call soul.
Right, the neshama.
And there you can create that distance. So that one of the key takeaways for most people is you're not your thoughts and feelings. We all have them. They occur. They can be very positive. They can be negative, but you're not them. You don't have to identify with them. Both on the positive side of today, I'm feeling amazing and awesome. And 10 minutes later, I'm not. You don't want your whole life fluctuating with that. You say, those are thoughts and feelings. They can come and pass. And I can notice that I notice that. I'm something separate. Who I am is something more than that. And when you can get to that space, that's very calming. One simple, to make it much simpler, is imagine you're watching a really good movie. It's gripping, right? So you have the sound effects. Your heart is pumping with the character, right? But then if somebody walks past you with popcorn, what happens? You're just like chilled, right? The whole thing buzzed. What happened? Because you went from being in it to the observer. Right. And one of the best things we can learn how to do is actually to pull ourselves back out from being in this horror movie, in this negative space, to, I was just watching. And just that itself pops me down into, okay, that was much calmer because I'm not so vested in it.
Great. I love it. So once a person, let's say myself, once you break the observer from the motions. Mm-hmm. So who is the observer then? You say it's you, but what is that? If you're not your emotions, and what are you?
So again,
and you can say the word soul. I know that, but what is that?
From the Eastern perspective, they'll talk about your consciousness or your seat of consciousness that you can sit and observe. And I believe that we will discover what is consciousness, what gives us consciousness, what makes us aware, what is that capacity that makes us only humans have. We believe that's soul. And so you're touching on some level to that deeper aspect of what it means to be human, that can notice, can observe, and you are not just taken up with your thoughts and feelings.
So if someone wanted a practical takeaway, like I want to do something practical, I just listened to this, would you suggest they try meditation or some kind of mindfulness exercises?
They can certainly try first to just sit with themselves without any distractions. Try for a minute just to sit and notice what comes up for you, and try to breathe through, stay calm and relaxed. For people who really have negative voices, we try to, talk back nicely like you would talk to your child or your best friend, right? Till they can even settle down. But then if you can sit with it without having to combat it back, it's even better. And ultimately to learn to watch it. And if you can get better at this, it's very gradual, 1 minute, 3 minutes. But don't sit down. I'm going to do 20 minutes and I'm going to be calm. You're not going to be calm. You're actually going to be, a hailstorm is going to hit you from inside. Negativity, future, this is nonsense. This guy is hokey pokey. None of this works, right? That's all the voice. And when you can say, oh, notice the voice. Just watch it for a moment. That's like the guy who walked past with the popcorn. The second you can observe it, and you'll go back and forth. And while you're doing any of these things, don't beat yourself up. And and when the self-criticism comes, you might lose it. You'll fall into it. Wherever you catch yourself, just pull back out. And try to accept yourself as you are, fully human, messy. And know also that who designed us with all this? You see, we view that really this is sort of a distraction. I'm supposed to be okay. I'm supposed to be a good husband, a good father, learning, providing for my family, etc. Like all this emotional stuff is just like something I need to bypass. No. Some of the greatest challenges of what it means to be a human, what it means to be an Eved Hashem, what it means to be healthy, what it means to be a good spouse, father, etc., is to be able to deal with these challenges. God, I didn't ask for this morning. Nobody asked for shame in the morning, right? The ability to say, that is part of my challenge, whatever God giving me. My difficult, impulsive 7-year-old, my difficulty parenting them, my difficulty communicating, my sadness, my anxieties, my fears, my insecurities. Those are all part of the unique, customized design package for me. So instead of saying, oh, I'm not supposed to have that, if you have it, we believe that's what you're supposed to have. And that's your opportunity. It's not just every opportunity you have to bring some acceptance, some love, some compassion, some light, caring, honesty to any space in here and to somebody else. That is godlike, and that is what I think is religion and Judaism really is all about.
Deep. What I was just thinking, because what happens if a person, does this exercise where they work on this shame or this emotion, or they meditate daily, and they get to a place where they start questioning what they're doing? Is that a scary? Like, what happens if you're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore? Mm-hmm. Like, is that like, what do you do with that?
So I think it's the same thing as everything we're talking about. So many things we're afraid of. To be vulnerable to what might I uncover about myself. To be, what if I really share my weaknesses with you? Can you really accept me? And that's what keeps us out of really sharing ourselves. And that's what keeps shame going. So one of the best antidotes to shame is to really open yourself up vulnerably and share with an empathic person. Now, somebody has to earn that, right? They've demonstrated that they have that capacity for empathy. They can really understand where you're coming from. They're not going to judge you. And the same thing for ourselves. We might discover something about that. It's interesting. You mentioned, it just popped into my head. So I once went to a picture framing store. This is totally random. And there's all these random pictures up there, people's grandparents, these huge things. And then I'm looking at the guy behind the counter, and I see a law degree framed behind me. And I think, is this like a gimmick? I said, what's that? And he said, that's mine. And it's from an extraordinarily prestigious law school. And I said to him, but what's that about? He says, that's for my parents. He says, I love art.
Wow.
So there's about $250,000 worth of education, 3 years of life on the framed wall. He discovered somewhere along the way, he doesn't want to do that. And he's sitting there telling me how much he loves his job. So until you're ready to actually face, why am I doing this? What am I doing it for? What really gives me meaning and fulfillment? You might be stuck doing something that you don't really want to be doing for your whole life. And that's part of what living courageously really means, is courageous for ourselves, to be able to go into those deeper recesses within us openly and say, hey, I'm going to open that door to the basement and see what's in there. And that's integral to the part of therapy, is what we help people open themselves up to themselves. That's awesome. That's what you're really learning about yourself.
Wow. I'm like so blown away.
He's blown away. And I'm feeling very empowered, so very positive. Do we have any more questions?
I think so. Do you have anything?
You want to look at our list? Because I don't want to miss anything.
Okay.
I did want some more examples. If you
Of?
could give us some more examples of like how the shame would play out, and then if you're sort of watching it happen, I guess I'm thinking more in another person. What could someone do to help that? Like, let's say I'm seeing my kid, feeling the shame and expressing, I'm so bad or whatever it is. What would the right response
let's
be?
actually make it more realistic. For a 7-year-old, what are you likely to see them do? How would you know that they're sort of in shame? What are you going to see? What kinds of things would you imagine seeing from your 7-year-old? I would say, I think maybe there's some shame going on.
I don't know, let's say run to his room, crying.
Right. So, we start with, they run away. They're avoiding a lot of, so we talked about all the ways adults avoid. We have these very sophisticated ways. Younger kids they run, they bolt, they bounce. I'm out. All right. There's blushing. Right. There's that emotional look. We learn to suppress some of that core emotion. We don't sit there go like this, but you can notice like we look away and you sort of slink off somewhere. Adults, we turn to our phones so that you can't tell that that's a shame move. Like I'm out. So this is not crisis. There's shame. That's part of the human condition. You can try to help be there for them. The first thing is to be okay with them in their shame. That we're all going to have that, and for them to know that that's also going to happen. And then to just be loving and accepting. Most of the time, what little kids need isn't some deep psychological speech. They need you to put them on their lap and give them a hug. Mm-hmm. And what does that convey? You're loved as you are. You're safe. You're cherished. So what we convey in our actions is 1,000 times more effective than words. As kids get older, we can start again to teach them, okay, it's very natural that, if you drop the pass on the court, you're going to feel ashamed. And there's going to be a party that says, don't get on the court again, or you stink and he's so much better than you, and all this narrative. And say, that's normal. I get that too. And we're going to ignore that. And we keep going. And in this family, we get up and we fight. Not that we get up and we don't have that. We keep going. So we starting to model and teach, not that we're going to be perfect, not that we're not going to have it, but that we persevere and that we share about it. And so like a simple exercise that I do in my house just also helps the conversation. We share something from your day, bad, medium, and good. So it's not just, okay, tell me something good that happened. You want to know something that they reflected on. And you want them to be able to say, okay, and you want to be able to say, we can move forward, and that's part and parcel of normal life. And then you can be there to support them, to accept them, to love them. The most important thing is that they feel that in all of their humanness, they're loved and cherished.
So we do the, on Shabbos, we say like what your favorite part of the week was. Mm-hmm. But I really like that. What was your favorite part of the week?
What was the hardest part of the week, maybe? Like how we were
anything that's eliciting also the struggle, the human struggle. One of the things that we so rarely teach is about struggle. And then we're all struggling and be like, what on earth is going on? Right. One of the things I try to teach all the educators and everything that we work on is to embed this basic relationships, communication, how to deal with struggles, anxiety, depression, all this stuff that's so part and parcel of the human condition, to put that into our, from kindergarten up, so that we're not waiting, now you need to see somebody, right? We all need to see somebody. We all need help. We can't do this alone. That's the other thing. We have this notion of the self-made person. Nonsense. Torah says, Lo tov yosef levado. It is terrible for you to be alone. We can't do this alone. We all need each other, and our kids certainly need us, and we need to teach them ways to live and ways to cope.
Interesting. When Rabbi Babad was here from Relief, he spoke about the fact that, and Rabbi Rappaport also, that anxiety was a huge an issue that they are encountering on a big scale. And do you think that this shame is causing anxiety?
So it's an excellent question. Anxiety is skyrocketing. Anxiety is something that's all over the place around the world. And so this is one of the things that we're really grappling with in general, is worldwide, but particularly in the U.S., despite our efforts, rates of anxiety, depression, suicidality are all going the wrong direction, and happiness is getting worse. So we're missing something core, something central. People are not feeling accepted. people are not feeling okay. So one of the drivers for anxiety is going to be, if I'm not okay, I'm going to be very anxious. Are you going to see this about me? What am I going to fail next? When these shame tapes play, they create all sorts of fear. There are plenty of ways to have anxiety. You can have pretty decent self-concept and have specific phobia or fear of something specific. But a lot of times when you're talking about especially relational anxiety and those kinds of things, am I measuring up? Just a couple weeks ago when they came out that Instagram's destroying mental health. What's happening, right? Because if I see, wow, you look perfect, what's going to happen inside me? I can't look that way. I can't have a vacation like that. I can't live up to that. So that plays into an anxious but shame and perfectionist-based narrative that we struggle with.
Wow. So unbelievable.
Right, and then you have shame for having anxiety.
Exactly. And then you feel worse. And it's terrible, right? So it's a constant cycle. You're absolutely right. No. That's what we call them, these shame cycles. And shame cycles are one of the greatest drivers for all sorts of deep issues and lesser issues. So that's the other thing that people wait until, okay, no, I don't have these massive addictions or I don't have this, all my shame tip. We don't need to make dramatics. Let's talk about improving quality of life. How much better would you feel if you could sit with yourself a little bit longer, if you could really share yourself more, if you could be there for your friends and your spouse and your loved one and your kids, and they could vice versa? How much more okay would we all be if we could put down some of our masks and actually be vulnerable? What would happen? I say, 85% of our issues would probably go away if we all ran around with a ticker tape, just digitally displayed what we were actually thinking. Because I'm projecting to you that, no, you're totally cool. Everything's got this. You got this law practice. Everything's amazing, right? And we're all running around projecting this kind of stuff. And if we just saw that we're all so much more human than otherwise, and this is what it means to be human, and this is part of the human condition, and we could stop pretending and start actually being there for one another, incredible things could happen.
I feel like we should end on this note. No, but I do want to say that I think you're really tapping into what we're trying to do in this podcast, like everything you just said. Is this not just like a mental health podcast, or we're going to talk about anxiety one week, OCD the next week, depression the next week? Like, we want to make life better for everyone. That's why we're bringing up these topics.
Right, and this
I
is
think you had
really
incredible things to say. So
really, really excellent view on these topics and issues. Just unbelievably fascinating.
I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back because as soon as the camera was off, I shared something personal that I wasn't sure if I could share on the air, but we're going to share it on the air. I was saying that Yoni had a little bit of the opposite of a lot of the theories that you've just been sharing, and I shared the story that I'll share again, that my son, on the first day of Little League last spring, his first at-bat, he strikes out. And he goes to the side, whatever, he was fine. And Yoni turns to me and says, that only I could hear, "Oh, we're not coming back next week. Why did we sign him up for this? I hate organized sports." I think that was the word you used. And now we're trying to piece that together.
So now the prosecutor's in the other chair.
Former prosecutor. So what I said was, some of that's true. What I said was that I was concerned that organized sports can be very challenging for a kid who, has to, now that we're talking about this, it's definitely changes my perspective. But at the time, I thought that dealing with the fact that you are, you connect, you identify with the team, with your, and if you're not a great player, it's like, what's the point? You're like, none of these, now that, Tara has a student who, made it to the Major League Baseball, but, but most students, the organized sports has no economic value. You're more likely to hurt your body than, you could jog if you want to get a good workout, So organized sports, my at one point I had the view that it could hurt the
self-esteem,
the self-esteem and the identity of a person if they're the bottom three. It happens to be our kid is not.
Just saying, he improved greatly over the season.
Disclaimer. But I think this is what you're trying to say, is that it's okay, right? Is that? I mean, this is what.
So if you're willing to go down this road for a moment, let's try something. Can you tap into that feeling that you had when that last strike, he swings and he misses. What happened for you? What'd you feel?
I felt bad for him. I just felt bad that he, I guess, was embarrassed that he that he struck out.
So going back to the stuff we talked about before, here's one of the most incredible things and one of the most difficult things about being a parent. Your wife said he got up and sort of skedaddled. He looked pretty okay. Our egos are so wrapped up with our kids. It actually pains us. We feel shame. If that kid's on stage and doesn't remember their lines or strikes out at bat, our heart sinks. And so that's the same thing, and that's natural. And that means you're connected to your kid. That's good.
Right.
That's also the danger. That's what closes down the empathic space. That's what makes us want to, okay, I'm going to shield them. Or, okay, we're hiring a baseball coach ASAP. This kid is not striking out again, right? We're trying to bubble wrap them. We're trying to prevent them from having these negative effects. And, of course, striking out in public, it stinks for everybody. But how many situations in life where he's not going to be the best? He's going to strike out on things that are way more important than that. Forget economic value or not. He's going to strike out in a relationship. He's going to strike out. He's going to feel shame for himself in a healthy way that I didn't live up to that. He's going to have unhealthy feelings. And the ability to go and persevere. And for him to look back and say, it's okay that you're sad. And we're going back in there. And it's okay that you're not going to be the best. And you're not going to be the best at everything. Because that's the other tape that we run. We're going to perfect, okay, if we can't perfect ourselves, we're going to perfect our kids. And that's how you create a recipe for a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. If you go the opposite way, it's okay to try and fail. It's all about getting up in every area of life. And that's your only job. Actually, to go back, you talked about the religious perspective. We have a concept that in the 99% of things that we do, we have no control over the results. God does. Ours is only effort. So the biggest memo we can give to ourselves and our kids, try. You do yours. You can't all of a sudden become a home run hitter if you never strike out. And you can't learn anything new. You can't try anything new. You can't run a business. You can't learn Torah. You can't do anything unless you're going to try and fail repeatedly. And that's the message we need to give ourselves and them is that's life. We're here for you. We're going to support you. Go get them.
Right, which is why I actually didn't take him out.
He's still in the league.
He's still in the league.
Yes.
They won the championship. I listened to my wife, but yeah, that's good advice.
Okay, we're gonna end this now, unless we find another story, and then we'll turn it back on.
Thank you so much for listening. I just love that idea. Like, are you okay with yourself? That Dr. Shloimie said really, really blows my mind. Yeah, I mean, from all the podcasts that are being produced, this is definitely one that I over 3 times have listened to. Don't judge me, but you know what? I'm okay. I'm okay with that. That's me. I'm okay with it. I'm just using some of that therapy. But if you have any challenges or are facing any issues, please call our friends at Relief, or you can go on their website, reliefhelp.org. You can send them email. All of the information about them are going to be in the show notes. And Relief is that service. They're going to refer you to the top psychologist, therapist, psychiatrist, whoever it is that fits you. You call up, it's completely confidential, and they've been doing this for so long, and we're more than excited to do this together with their backing, because there are so many therapists and psychologists out there, and we need guidance. We don't always know where to turn, and we turn to Relief for having the best people about talking about the different challenges. So also, if you did not subscribe yet, you're just listening or watching, please, if you're on YouTube and you're on Living Lchaim's channel, please subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell us what you like about this. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever, please subscribe and rate us 5 stars. If you rate us 5 stars, we'll be very thankful. It really means the world to us. We read through every single comment, so leave a comment if you could on Apple. And yeah, thanks so much. We have incredible therapists, psychologists, and different people who've dealt with, have a lot of experience with these challenges that we're talking about coming up. So get ready. 2 weeks, another fresh episode coming your way. Till next time, stay safe. Living Lchaim.